Hey everybody, and welcome to a wrap-up. So I have a lot to wrap up for this month because I read 17 books, if I'm not mistaken, in the month of July, which, I mean, yay, but also on the other hand, that's a lot of books to wrap up for you guys. Some of them are already in the same series, but that's really only the case for like 3 books, so I'm gonna try my best to go through this in a concise manner, but like, get yourself a drink in case you are seeing the length of this video. It probably is gonna be still pretty lengthy, okay? So the month of July is the month in which I was hosting my own read-a-thon, Game Night-a-thon. So it's the 4th year that we're doing Game Night-a-thon, 2nd year in a row in which we were playing a version of the board game Labyrinth. So in this game we were going through the maze trying to collect all the icons, and basically we're choosing our books based off of the association with the icon that we were making on our end. So in the month of July I ended up having the best reading month I've had so far this year, when you look at the numbers at least. I've read the most amount of pages that I've read all year, I've read the most books that I've read all year, so yeah, quantity wise definitely at the best, and let's talk about the quality, right? So let's go through this from what I finished first, and please remember that when I finished first, I finished 16 books in the meantime, so it might be a little bit hazy. So, which is A Minor Detail by Adanya Shipley. So this is the book that I read for the watermelon prompt, because a watermelon is very much associated with Palestine, and this is a book about Palestine. So in this one we are looking at a Israeli unit who's basically scouring the countryside looking for scramblers, basically. Scrabblers, is that how you say that in English? Whatever. So they're looking for remaining members of the original population who are still roaming that area, because they've basically just taken this land from the Palestinian people and they're trying to defend it for Israel. They stumble upon a few locals and they kill off all the adults and they kidnapped the young girl. We are looking at the story through the perspective of the Israeli officer. He on his end is dealing with an infection to his leg, and the infection to his leg very much comes to symbolize and portray the horrors of what they are doing to this girl within their camp, because they are humiliating the girl, but they're also sexually assaulting her as well. So it's a lot of horror in terms of what is taking place, and only made manifest through the visuals of the putrefaction of the officer's wounds. He on his end doesn't necessarily reflect on whether what they are doing there is right or wrong. There is no real moral judgment going on, but he is definitely constantly trying to clean out this wound and get this wound healed and purified, as if he's trying to clean out this stain upon his soul that they are now creating, and the book will show that that is impossible. Next up we have Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter by Heather Fawcett. I had this book physically, I've already given it away to a friend, Daniela, from the channel Only for a Page. I thought this book was okay, but that is just about it. So this is a fantasy, cozy fantasy, in which we're looking at a woman who basically runs this cat shelter. She has to look for a new location for her cat shelter because magicians have basically destroyed a neighborhood, and then that was the neighborhood in which she had her shelter before, and so she can no longer rent that same property. She has to look for a new place to rent. And there's this one place that she ends up being attracted to, and finally she goes in and kind of asks for a price, because she's convinced that the price is going to be way too high, because this is a very nice part of the neighborhood. However, it turns out to be a surprisingly low price point, and she'll find out why. I thought that this book was going to be amazing because it has the name Cat Shelter in the title, so I was going to assume that it was going to mainly focus on the cat shelter and that I would just absolutely love it because I love cats, but I feel like the cat shelter is definitely overshot by its presence within the title, and that there is very little like attention actually paid to the cat shelter. There's a lot more going on when it comes to the sort of like clandestine, flamboyant character that she will meet in this new location where she is moving to, and a lot more focus on the magic that is involved in that, and sort of like a danger to the shelter rather than really focusing on the shelter itself and on the cats, and so that kind of disappointed me, I have to admit. Then we have Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is my book for the boat prompt, because one of the characters is has a POV that is basically taking place on the boat. So Black Sun is the first book in a trilogy, which is called the Between Earth and Sky trilogy by Rebecca Roanhorse. In this one we are looking at multiple characters. As I said, one of them is on a ship, so this is basically the captain of a ship who has basically been tasked to bring this one guy over to another part of the world where our other perspective will be. And basically this is a very mysterious guy who has like his eyes covered, he appears to be blind, nobody really knows much about him, and she is taking him to the city where our other protagonist is located, and she is a priest basically of, I want to say a sun cult, but I'm not entirely sure at this point in time. She's basically the leader of that cult, and she is dealing with some internal strife about the direction that she is taking when it comes to this sisterhood, to this religion. So she wants to bring the religion closer to the people, kind of step away from all this ceremony and pomp, and bring religion closer to the people again, to show the advantages for people, to show why people should care, why people should support the religion. And within her own environments there are a lot of people who are resenting her for that, because a lot of people feel like, you know, this is the way that things have always been done and this is the way that things should remain. And she, as someone who was brought up in very lowly circumstances and as a consequence was very unlikely to reach this type of a position, is being resented for the changes that she is making. I enjoyed Black Sun. I actually really enjoyed this one, and I'm very much looking forward to continuing as well. Next up, I read A Cup of Tea for the Tarot prompts by K.C. Blair. This is the first book in a, I don't know, a series at least, the Tea Princess Chronicles, but I don't think that I will be continuing. And don't get me wrong, this book is nothing bad or anything like that. This book is actually good, but it's also nothing special. So in this one we're looking at a princess who basically, at the beginning of the book, she kind of has to devote herself. She has to decide like how she's going to serve the people. She's not like the first princess, she's somewhere later down in the line, and so all of her sisters have this sort of like very dedicated way in which they are helping the people, and she decides that she doesn't actually really know how best to serve the people, so she chooses exile, which basically means that she's going to be cast out of the royal family and has to make it on her own. So she makes this decision and then kind of clandestinely leaves the city and goes to another place that is part of this world, where she is basically taken under the wing of a witch who is hiding from the authorities because she doesn't want her power to be registered, because she assumes that that will be bad things for her, because witches are very much looked down upon within this world as well. And she is going to try and become a tea master. So she kind of uses the knowledge that she has gained as a princess to try and work in this tea parlor and be able to perfect the art of tea making. There's a lot more that comes into play as well when it comes to some sabotage from, let's say, gentrification within this town, and I definitely did think it was fun. It had an adventure story at its core as well, but I definitely enjoyed the overarching, like the overall story of her trying to come into her own by looking for something that she's passionate about and finding ways that she can still help people, serve people by becoming this tea master, and you know, ways in which she can come to realize what her actual strengths and weaknesses are. And yeah, it also has a found family aspect that I really enjoyed, but overall it's also just like, yeah, I read that, I did that, but it wasn't anything standout, so I also don't think I want to continue. Next thing I finished was Eurotrash by Christian Kracht. This is a Swiss book, it's translated from the German. In this one we're following a guy who's basically going back to Zurich, I think, where his mother lives, in order to visit her, and they've had a really fraught relationship. His mother's side of the family used to belong to the Nazi party. His father's side of the family used to be like into some BDSM stuff, I guess. There is a fraught relationship between him and his mother because his mother has been struggling with a lot of mental issues, and she's been in and out of a mental health hospital for a while. And when she's out, she's basically drinking herself into oblivion all the time. And so he decides that he can no longer take this, he can no longer just sit by and watch this happen, and so he takes his mother and so he and his mother decide to go on a road trip to the Swiss Alps using money that she has inherited from her Nazi parents. And so basically their goal is going to be to try and spend as much of this money as possible, try and spend as much of this dirty money as possible. This is a book that was longlisted for the International Booker Prize, and for a while I was like, but it does have an interesting ending that made me go like, oh, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know whether that means I should reread this book from a completely entire new perspective, which I didn't, but it definitely made me understand why this could potentially be on a Booker Prize long list, because I do think that it's a book that you can have conversations about. I should mention a book that I DNF'd, which is The Book of Fallen Leaves by A.S. Tamaki. So I got about halfway through this book and I was just not interested in it. It has a few perspectives, but I feel like the story never kicked in. I mean, the story kicked in around halfway through, then I finally got a little bit of a sense about where the story was going to go, but even at this point in time, I can really tell you very little about what happened in it. We have a rebellion that took place in the past, and we are following, amongst others, the son of the guy who hosted that rebellion and a servant girl who basically helped hide him from the authorities after this has taken place. They are now in a different part of the world, and we're also following the brother of the person who portrayed this rebellion, and he is still very much in the power scheme of this world and helped kind of like, I don't know, legitimize the daughter that came from the rebellious guy. But that is all I know, and all of that is set up. You know, the actual story, because it only happens halfway through, that we kind of get like a little bit of an inkling of like, oh, is that what we're going to get? That I don't want to talk about because, yeah, that is spoilers potentially, right? But so yeah, moving back to books I actually did finish this month. Let me just get these on my lap. The next one is a reread of Mistress of Lies by K.M.M. Wright. This is a book with trans representation, first of all, so if you're looking for that, then do check this one out. And this is a book in which we will be focusing mainly on 3 characters. This is a world very much this is very much a authoritarian regime type of story. We have this eternal king, I think he's called, who basically is the magic in this world is like blood magic, so it feels very vampirical. It isn't actually vampires, but basically he's also using this blood magic to stay eternally young. He's basically always taking blood and using that to reinvigorate himself. And the elites within this world are also people who use blood magic to, you know, fortify their positions and all those things. People are also required to donate a certain amount of blood all the time, and so this is very much a populace that is under tight control from an authoritarian figure. In this context, we are following a young head of house who has just become head of house by killing her father and passing his death off as a natural death. She is a clandestine figure who's basically kind of working in the shadows to try and uncover dirt about everybody around her in order to try and make changes to this society. And she uncovers the presence of a long lost relative to the Eternal King, who has a power to control the people around him using his voice. Young Samuel has basically been hiding all of his life, trying to avoid using his gift as much as possible, mainly out of moral reasons, but also because people cannot know about his presence, because then they will use his powers against him and make him use his powers for reasons that he wouldn't want to be using them. They together will be trying to make changes to the society, and they have an unlikely semi-ally in the royal blood worker, Isaac, who basically is who is the trans character within this book, and he used to be a friend of, and he used to be like the best friend of Shan, our female protagonist. However, once he became royal blood worker, they kind of had a falling out, and there is going to be a lot of lusting between all three characters. I like this one a lot because it does definitely twist and turn at times, and it does definitely have a sort of like twist, I guess, towards the end that I didn't necessarily see coming, and it definitely did have a twist towards the end that I didn't see coming. And when I reread this book at some point in time, I was like, oh yeah, wasn't this the person? And I think that because we're trying to find, wasn't this the killer that we're trying to look for? But when and then it was like, I know, I probably thought the same thing the first time I read it. Next up, I finished My Life in Japan by Chris Broad. This is a non-fiction. Chris Broad has a YouTube channel called Abroad in Japan, and so this is a non-fiction about his life in Japan over the first 10 years. He basically joined the JET program, which is a program that allows native English speakers to go to Japan and help out in schools over there, helping to raise the level of English within Japanese schools. And so he started off his first years within that program, and so this very much talks about, you know, like the culture shock and cultural specifics when it comes to Japanese society and his time living in Japan. This is very much more of a cultural introduction to Japan than it is of a, like, that it is an introduction into what you will see in Japan. This is very much like kind of looking at his time there and his difficulties of, you know, like integrating within Japanese societies, and his kind of takeaways from certain cultural events and cultural practices that he witnessed over there. Next up, we go into the Read It Short weekend. So Read It Short is a weekend that I always spend in which I focus on reading short books, and so this time we combined it. And I have just realized that I've also forgotten to give like the prompts for a lot of the past books, but so they will have been on the screen. I assume editing me will have had to fix this, sorry. So next up I read A Spindle Splintered by Alexi Harrow. This is also a reread. This is a duology, a Sleeping Beauty inspired fairy tale retelling. So in this one we're following a terminally ill 21-year-old who basically has this incurable disease because of environmental waste that was deposited by a company. She's currently like the last known survivor, and none of the other kids who had contracted this illness managed to live past the age of 22. So she is dealing with the fact that she may very well not be alive anymore the next year. She has always had an attraction to the story of Sleeping Beauty, and on her 21st birthday party, her best friend basically brings a spinning wheel over, and so she pricks her finger on the spinning wheel and finds herself in an alternate world where she meets the real-life Sleeping Beauty. The story, of course, deals a lot with the illness that our protagonist has to deal with, and with the difficulty of knowing that you have an illness that has no cure, and an illness that sees people die very young. She is making the best of her life, and she has an amazing best friend who will do anything for her, but it also talks about the difficulty of navigating other people's hope aside of your own hopes, you know, the hope of her father, and how her father got totally lost in trying to find any possible cure and was focusing more on that than on actually spending time with his daughter, and his daughter having to deal with the look of hope in his eyes, knowing that for the moment at least there is no hope, and like how much pressure that puts on her, or like how much pressure she feels as a result, because she knows that most likely she will disappoint him in that regard, even though it's of course not her who is a disappointment, it's just a situation that is a disappointment. And so it has a lot of conversations like that going throughout the book, which I really enjoy. The ending to it, I don't know fully whether I'm fully happy about that, but it's also because it touches upon something that is happens a lot when disability representation is presented within a fantasy story. And so yeah, but I'll have to see when I finish this duology what I feel about it. Actually, A Spindle Splintered was for the Band-Aid prompt. So during Read It Short we had 3 extra prompts, which is the Band-Aid, the Mirror, and the Tory Gate, and so those you can use multiple times. And so I used the Band-Aid for A Spindle Splintered, and then I used the Tory Gate for the next one, which is The Soul Catchers by Naoko Higashi. This is a healing fiction in which we're basically looking at people who have just passed away, and rather than passing on, they choose to inhabit an inanimate object in the world in order to be able to be close to their loved ones again. And so we're following multiple stories, and so looking at the reasons why people would choose to do so, but also looking at the people who have been left behind and their journey towards overcoming and dealing with the grief of having lost the person in their life. I think they were very, very short vignettes, all of them, so it's a very short novel in full, and you get like a whole lot of stories in it, which on the one hand is nice for showing you a wide range of different situations when it comes to dealing with grief. However, it also meant that we didn't really get to go deep into any of them, and I also didn't always feel comfortable with all of them, but that is also typical for reading a Japanese book. I think there are definitely certain things within Japanese society and Japanese culture that very much clash with Western society and Western culture, and so reading Japanese literature, I feel like this comes out regularly. And probably because I read more Japanese culture books than any other Asian culture or any other non-Western culture, I just am exposed to it more often within Japanese literature than in any of the other books, because I'm sure that I would have the same if I were reading a ton of, I don't know, Indian translation, Chinese translation, translations from Africa, from Latin America. Probably that would just happen as well, that you're exposed to certain things that just aren't seen as normal within your own culture, within your own cultures. I mean, there are practices in Belgian culture that are not okay for the US culture, for example. And let's look at the most like basic one of that, which is the drinking age, for example. So yeah, I think it's normal and I don't mind. But yes, there are definitely some things in here that you're like, yeah, I don't know what to think about that. Next up, I read 3 volumes of Spy X Family by Tatsuya Endo, which is a manga series in which we basically have a fakely assembled family, because one of our protagonists is a spy and he has to infiltrate into a prestigious academy in order to try and get close to the father of one of the kids who is attending. And so he recruits a fake family, but the fake family also consists of some really special people without him knowing him. His fake wife is actually an assassin who does not know that he's a spy, and his fake daughter is actually a telepath who knows about the identities of her 2 parents because she can read it in their minds, but none of them know that she can read their minds. So it is a fun series. I reread the first 2 for Read It Short, and I finally read the 3rd one as well, and I hope to continue on with the series a little bit quicker from now on. And then I read another sort of like short story anthology, which is She and Her Cat by Tsubasa Yamaguchi and Monoko Shinkai. This is a short novella basically in which we're looking at, I think, 4 stories of different cats and their owners. What I liked about this is that in every story you get the perspective of the owner and the perspective of the cat. They're also linked to one another. The cats know one another, for example. Some of the adults know one another. And so we have different stories of people and their cats, so including, for example, a young artist who kind of is very confident about her work and her art and the merit of her work and her art. However, ultimately she ends up having a very much lower sort of like career than this other guy in her class, because while his quality of work might be lower, he's actually the one who's willing to go out there and you know, like do the circuit, let's say, and present his work in certain showcasings where she thinks that she's like too highly qualified for, or who's actually submitting his work where she finds herself getting stuck in a rut and unable to continue working. And so I get it, and so to some extent she kind of realizes, like, I am self-sabotaging, I'm taking myself out of this race, and this guy that I was looking down upon and who I said that had like really horrible art that wasn't worth anything, he is actually making something out of it because he is willing to put in the work and he is disciplined about his art. That is just one of the stories, and it goes into more than all of that, but that is part of what I still remember about these stories. But I mainly remember that I definitely did enjoy them, and that these cats definitely felt like the way that I would imagine a cat to think and to act, and so I liked that portrayal as well. And then the final thing that I read for Read It Short, which is also once again for the Torii Gate, most of this was all for the Torii Gate, is Gifted by Suzumi Suzuki, which I did not rate because I don't know how I feel about it. This is a story about a daughter and her mother, and they have a very fraught relationship once again. And the daughter works in the entertainment industry, and she basically has seen a lot of people pass away around her as well recently. And you know, I don't remember what was it. What was the deal with her? Oh yeah, her mother basically yeah, her mother definitely treated her badly over the course of her life, and is just about to pass away, or has just passed away. I think she has. Alright, so my camera overheated, so we'll have to do the final books again. And actually I should have taken this time to actually remember what this book was about, but I didn't. So the final thing that I finished for the Read It Short weekend was Gifted by Suzumi Suzuki, and I'll just have to read the description because I know parts of it, okay, but it's just like a lot of it is vague to me at this point in time again. So, a moving portrayal of a troubled mother-daughter relationship shortlisted for Japan's prestigious Akutagawa Prize. In 2008, the unnamed narrator of Gifted is working as a hostess and living in Tokyo's nightlife district. One day, her estranged mother, who is seriously ill, suddenly turns up at her door. As the mother approaches the end of her life, the two women must navigate their strained relationship, while the narrator also reckons with events happening in her own life, including the death of a close friend, all under the bright lights of Tokyo's sleepless town. And yes, that is, in vagueness, what I still remembered about it, but I actually don't really remember my thoughts about this one. And that is indicative of the fact that I did not rate this book, because at the end of it I was just like, I don't know what I felt about this one. And I feel like I've read a short story collection already of Suzumi Suzuki, and that I had the same feeling at the end of that, where I was just like, I don't know whether I liked what I just read. What I do definitely like about it is that it shows a different side to Japan than what we read in like healing fiction specifically, but also in a lot of the other Japanese books that I've been reading. A lot of those kind of show a Japan that is kind of the Japan that I expect to see, and Suzumi Suzuki definitely shows a little bit more of the underbelly of Japanese society, I guess, and thus shows us sides to Japan and to Japanese culture that we aren't necessarily exposed to. For example, the only book, like the only Japanese book that is not a manga in which I've seen queer characters mentioned is this book, Gifted. And so I do like that, because I do definitely want to see different sides to Japanese society, because definitely there is also the underground culture and all those things within Japan, and all those things. There are definitely also queer people within Japan, you know, they're not there. And so I would like to have a little bit more of a well-rounded view of Japan. And so I do like that about these books, but I'm always left being like, I don't know how I feel about what I've just read. And as is clear from this description also, I really don't remember much about it. It is also like 100 pages, so it isn't very long, so there isn't much that can happen in it. But yeah, I definitely feel like that has really like disappeared immediately from my brain. So, Read It Short was over, but we did still manage to read a few things. So, for the final week of the month, I still finished 3 things. First of all, I finished Paladin Strength by T. Kingfisher. So this is the second book in the Of Saints and Steel series, which is a series in which we're looking at these paladins who used to belong to a god who was... I don't actually remember what the name is of the god, but this god passed away and all of the paladins basically went berserk, and the majority of them passed away, and the consequences, the others have to live with the acts that they performed in their berserk state on that day. They are now working for the Monastery of the Rat, in which they are performing civil duties, basically. And so in the first story we already had a paladin that we were focusing on, which was a paladin Stephen, who helps out a woman who is falsely accused of a crime. And that crime story basically continues into the second book, as the second paladin that we're following, who is Istvan, he kind of takes up the role that Stephen was doing in the first book, and so he goes on with his investigation past the events of the first book. And Istvan is dealing with a little bit of a complication, as he is passing through this particular land when a woman is basically thrust upon him, and this woman has some secrets of her own that she is keeping from him, and that will pose some complications, because basically she is part of a monastery, and well, it's not a monastery I guess when it's female nuns, but she's part of a nunnery and her fellow nuns have been kidnapped, and so she wants us to, so she's asking Istvan to help her find her sisters and bring them back to safety. I really enjoyed this series so far, and I've been enjoying the pairings that we've had so far in the storyline, the mix of sort of like the mystery or crime element that we're investigating with the relationship and the dynamics that go into this. I had a really good time with this one. I think that this one is a little bit of a less green flaggy protagonist than we had in the case of Stephen in book 1, but I still definitely enjoyed it a lot. I definitely enjoyed the amount of respect and honor that he gives to women, and you know, I'm very much looking forward to the third one. I actually don't know who we're going to be following in the fourth one, because we basically know 3 paladins as far as I'm aware, and so the third one, Galen, is a gay character, so I'm very much looking forward to, because I'm assuming that the next book is going to be queer. And yes, which is not to say that these books aren't queer already. There is definitely queerness already in these books, but the main characters have been, at the very least, it's been a male-female, you know, mixing in both cases. I don't remember whether potentially some of these characters were also bi, but I'm going to be happy to see a same-sex relationship within the third one. Next thing that I finished is another T. Kingfisher, and that is Snake Eater. This book was gifted to me for Christmas by Kitty from the channel Kitty and the Books, and so I picked this one up right after visiting her earlier on within this month, which you can see in my vlog for the Team Triangle week. And so Snake Eater is also a fantasy, I would say. It is definitely an urban fantasy. It takes place in a version of our world, but it is also a version of our world in which spirits are actually real. So our protagonist is a woman who basically is turning a new page in her life. She's leaving behind her old job, even though she did definitely enjoy her working with her colleagues, but she's mainly leaving behind an old boyfriend who made her feel shitty about herself and who made her doubt herself and her responses a lot. So she kind of automatically feels as if she is a burden to the people around her, as if the way that she responds to things is not the normal way to respond, as if she needs to doubt everything that she's about to say. And so she has all of these scripts that she makes in her mind to be able to answer to everyday questions when they are posed to her. And she is starting off anew in a desert town that her aunt lives in. However, when she arrives there, it turns out that her aunt has actually passed away a year ago. They just didn't know how to reach any of the relatives. But they suggest, like, rather than her returning with the next train to out of the town, they suggest, like, why don't you stay at your aunt's place for a little bit, because nobody has claimed the town yet and we definitely need more new people within our town, so you can stay as long as you like. Why can I not come up with her name? Selena. Selena is convinced that she's just staying there for a very short time, just as long as she needs to gather enough money to get a ticket back home, and she's even fearful that she might not even be able to get a ticket back home and she might need to call her ex-boyfriend to help her get back out of there. However, the longer she stays in the town, the more she also starts to feel welcome there, until it seems that there are things happening there that are out of the ordinary, and there might be more things than just her and her dog living within the house. I really enjoyed this one a whole lot. It is a book about somebody healing from past trauma, somebody coming into their own and learning to see themselves in a positive light, learning to love themselves and be confident in who they are. And it is a found family story, like a lot of T. Kingfisher books are, in which we have some really nice, wacky, flamboyant characters who are coming together and defending one another. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one a whole lot, and I was very happy to be reading these two Kingfishers at the same time. I was kind of worried at first to be reading two by the same author at the same time, but I definitely felt like they had their very own vibes, because one was like very clearly sort of like high fantasy set in a separate world, and the other one was very much urban fantasy. I definitely never like mixed them up with one another, and even though they both have sort of like the found family aspects, queer normative aspects that are similar to each other, learning to trust, learning to love again, and all those things in common, they never for one second felt so similar. They never actually really felt similar to one another. I really enjoyed experiencing them at the same time, because sometimes I'm hesitant to pick up too many T. Kingfishers, because I'm like, yeah, but you know, it'll just be like a variation of that other book, but in reality that really isn't the case. They definitely do stand out on their own. It's just that they kind of packing the same themes, why after a while, after having read a few of them, the way I think back on them, they're quite similar to one another. But this was a nice experience to kind of see again, like, you know, when I'm reading them, they don't feel like the same book. And then the final thing that I still finished was Dinner at the Night Library by Hika Harada. So this is another Japanese translated book. I would say it's probably considered as well as a healing fiction, but I don't know whether it fully fits in that. But in any case, we're looking at this young woman who has basically just left her job and is going to a new job because she's been offered a position in the night library. The night library is a library that's opened only at night, and it is a library that takes in very special collections because it takes in the past books of authors who've passed away. And when I say the past books, I mean the past books that they owned. So it can be part of their own catalog, but it can definitely also just be the books that they acquired over their years, the books that have influenced them as a consequence of the books that they were reading. And so this library is collecting these books and is putting them out on display, though they also have so many that some are actually only in a warehouse, but they're basically curating these collections and maintaining them and keeping them safe. And so we're going to be following this protagonist mainly throughout the story, though we also do shift from time to time, because the perspective that we are following her story from is a third-person perspective that mainly seems to be zooming in on her, but occasionally we will zoom out to other characters within this story. And I'm not entirely sure of the narrative device, because there is also an I narrator later on within the book, so I don't know whether after having read that I perspective I should be seeing him as being the narrator of the entire story, and so as he having told the rest of the story. But that doesn't fully make sense, because there are definitely times in which the narrator is talking about things that he was not a witness to, so he wouldn't be able to know. But so in any case, we are mainly looking at Otoha, yeah, I think that was her name, and her experiences in the library. Through her experiences we get to know about her backstory, the backstories of other people who are working in the library, and we get to know more about the library system and how it works and the reasoning behind the creation of the library, because there is a little bit of a mystery surrounding the library, in the sense that the owner has basically personally reached out to most of the employees within this library and offered them this job, but the interview was taking place only via audio. They have actually never seen the owner, and the owner is never there, so nobody actually knows what the owner looks like neither. I thought it was a really good book. I definitely thought it was a good book. I definitely enjoyed that it was a type of Japanese healing fiction book that I'm quite used to, but rather than having the story told through these different short stories where there's a kind of small link between all of them, this definitely felt more like a whole. It still had these episodes, but the episodes definitely sometimes flow into one another, for example, and they don't really feel like standalone events neither. They definitely feel like they're part of a bigger whole, like they are more just like chapters that somehow are called episodes. But I definitely think that I enjoyed that a lot more, and that is actually what I've been looking for. I've been wanting to continue reading more Japanese literature, but exploring more than healing fiction, because the thing that I found that I find taxing is not really the case, but bothersome about healing fiction is that, you know, reading this sort of like short story, interconnected short story format for 1 or 2 or 3 books is fine, but now that it is really just like the success formula, I get so tired of that way of structuring things, and I just want a little bit more depth. I want to be able to follow certain characters in the entire book, rather than having these small stories and having the people who are actually connected to one another, or the framing device that all of these short stories are taking place in, having that be more front and center, and learning more about that, which a lot of times with this interconnected short story format you're not really able to do so. But so yes, that is the final thing that I finished in the month of July. This is the 17th book. I will have a little bit of a stat over here, I will make room for it, that will detail my progress in the month of July, and you will see that I started off the month with 26 books on the TBR. I ended up with 24, which isn't an amazing progress, but if you look at the amount of books that I added to my collection in the month of July, then I feel like I've done an amazing job, okay? I definitely have a pile of physical books next to me at this moment, so I definitely have read quite a fair bit of physical books, and so even though a fair few were coming in the month of July, I also have gone through a fair bit of them, and like some of them are really like older books on my TBR, or books that I needed to reread in order to get to the oldest books on my TBR is probably a more accurate description of some of them. But I did get through 3, I think, of the books that I have added to my collection in 2025, which means that I now only have 6 left, and that is really good news, because prior to the end of 2026 I would like to have none left that I've acquired in 2025, because I make it a goal to always read the books that I acquire within the 1-year time period. Ultimately, I would like to reduce that maybe even, but you know, for the time being we are still at that pace. If I get the TBR collection down a little bit further, I might be able to make that a rule as well, but for the time being the 1-year time period is working. But and I'm happy to say that with 6 left and 5 months left within the year, that is looking like a really good prospect. You know, that's definitely going to be able to happen. But so yes, hope you guys enjoyed this video. See you guys for the next one. Bye!